Good morning, good afternoon to everybody. I am Michal Rimon. I am the CEO of Access Israel and the initiator of the Purple Vest mission. I am very grateful for you joining us today and reaching out to learn more and to join hands. This whole idea of international connections is the ability of all of us to learn from each other. Disabilities and accessibility is a subject that is relevant to us all, no matter where we live. And we're all finding solutions in our places of residence. And the idea is to share, to learn from each other. And this is what I've been doing for the last 16 years. And in the last year and a half, specifically, a lot of work with Ukraine, as you will see in a second, and bringing together a lot of knowledge and expertise and best practices from all over the world. I am, in a way, a messenger that is trying to make that connection and bring us all together to learn and become more inclusive in whatever we do. I understand that today the focus of our presentation is on inclusive employment, but in order to talk about inclusive employment, I do want to lay some basic terminology and basic knowledge. So we will start with something general that maybe you're all aware of, but just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Now, feel free, if you have any questions, if you have something in the middle that you want to talk, either in the chat or unmute yourself. And if it's not a bombarding of questions, I'm sure we can handle it. If I see it's too much and it cuts the flow of lecture, I will ask to write it in the chat, and every couple of minutes I will stop and give answers to what you're writing. Is that okay? Are we all okay with that? Perfect. So I will begin. I will begin by introducing me and us. Access Israel is an organization operating from Israel. We are the leading organization and basically the only organization in Israel that is focused on accessibility for rights and accessibility for all types of disabilities in all areas of life, with all types of accessibility as we will define it in a couple of minutes. Now, Access Israel was established 24 years ago in an Israel that was not accessible at all. Actually, the word accessibility was not used in Israel 24 years ago. Yuval Wagner, who you see here in the picture, in the small black and white picture, that is Yuval in his 20s. He is the son of a father that sits in a wheelchair. And he grew up in an Israel that was not accessible, and anywhere he wanted to go with his father, he and his brother had to pick him up, put him down. That was reality. And I don't know what about you, but if I would have had to be picked up and put down every place I go, I'd probably stay home and not want to go out. But that was reality for Yuval's family, and that's how they lived their lives. When Yuval was drafted to the Israeli army, he was an Air Force pilot. I don't know how it is in Ukraine, but in Israel, Air Force pilot is probably way there under God. He's like, it's probably one of the most prestigious things that you can be. At least that's what the pilots think. And he was very happy being a pilot. Unfortunately, when he was about 22 years old, in a flight up north, there was a malfunction. There was a technical problem with the helicopter he was flying in, and the rotor just snapped. And from a very high height, he plunged to the ground like a sack of potatoes. He's the only survivor of such an accident. There were 120-something accidents like this around the world. He is the only one who survived. And he chose life. He broke his neck. He is paralyzed from the neck down. You see him in the middle picture here. And he can move his hands like this, but anything below his neck he is paralyzed. He chose life. He lives life to the fullest. He got married, has 3 kids. He got divorced. He has a girlfriend. He went to study. He goes out. He tries to tour and do a lot of tourist things, which he loves. In an Israel, again, that was not accessible. 24 years ago, he made a couple of calls and then decided to write a letter as high as he can go to the president of Israel. At the time, it was President Ezer Weizmann, who was also a pilot. And as a pilot to a pilot, he basically said, what else do I need to give my country to gain respect in a non-accessible Israel? Well, between us, he didn't really think anybody will answer him. But 2 days later, he gets a phone call on Friday afternoon from the president of Israel, saying basically 3 things. 1, I apologize on behalf of Israel for not doing more for people with disabilities and elderly. Number 2, stop complaining, start doing, establish an NGO, the president has your back. And number 3, President Ezer Weizmann was very, decisive. He gave him 6 months. He said, in 6 months, we're going to launch your NGO at the president's residence. And that's how we began. We began with a mission. The mission has not changed. Accessibility is not a goal. Accessibility is the way to reach the goal. The goal is inclusion, true inclusion for people with all types of disabilities in all areas of life, with accessibility being the way to gain that inclusion. Accessibility is not just physical accessibility, as we also thought when we started Access Israel. It is accessibility of services, it's accessibility of technologies, it's accessibility socially, changing the DNA of our society to be more accepting, to be more inclusive in the way we treat people with disabilities and elderly on a daily basis. Any questions about that? So I will continue. So our mission was promoting accessibility and inclusion for people with disabilities and the elderly in order to improve the quality of life and enable them to integrate into society and live normal lives. Now, we are realistic. It's not that Yuval Wagner can fly a helicopter again, but he wants to live with maximum independence. I can tell you that the Israeli Air Force understood immediately that he might be physically injured, but his head is still very much there. And he continued serving for the Israeli Air Force for many, many years to come. He was released about 5-6 years ago as a lieutenant colonel. And he's striving since then to live a normal life as possible with dignity, equality, and maximum independence. Now, we are here today, and my connection with Ukraine started about 1 year and 2 months ago. When the war broke in Ukraine, Access Israel is very active in Israel and internationally. In Israel, we are focused on awareness raising, implementation, legislation, and technologies, a lot of training that we do. And internationally, we basically came to learn from the world and quickly understood the importance of sharing. We know we can learn from anyone, whether it's developing country or developed country, but we can also share and teach what we know and what we have developed in these 20 and somewhat years since we were established. Now, the idea is that after creating an international network, when the war began in Ukraine, we started receiving calls and emails and WhatsApps asking us to help, asking us advice. How do we take care of people with disabilities that are in Ukraine trying to be evacuated and the evacuation routes are not accessible? If you recall, in December 21, all over the world, the color purple lit up buildings on the day for the rights of people with disabilities. We had the Taj Mahal, the Empire State Building, the Eiffel Tower, and many, many other buildings all over the world with a message, leaving no one behind. Unfortunately, 3 months later, when the war broke in Ukraine, people with disabilities and the elderly were left behind. Now, I can tell you that when I started receiving the calls, one of the calls was an elderly lady traveling with her blind daughter. The blind daughter was in very bad condition, needing dialysis. They were on a train from eastern Ukraine, traveling to Lvov. A volunteer was waiting there to take them to the hospital. Unfortunately, there were bombings, which caused the train to divert its course. And instead of Lvov, they were on the way to Chelm, a city in Poland. I received the call saying in 6 hours, they're going to stop at Chelm. The ladies do not have any Polish money. They don't have any Polish papers. They don't know the language. Nobody's waiting for them. What can we do to help? To make a long story short, yeah.
Can you just check your captions? Because they think that this is Polish written here.
The what?
The Polish capturing. I can see the Polish capturing, and for some reason I cannot change it. So maybe it's yours.
So I suggest you call Shelly to fix it, because if I have a disability, it's this. I'm very bad with technology. So I suggest Shelly will come here and try to fix the captioning. My apologies. But in the meanwhile, there is a simultaneous translation, right? Excuse me for a second, Shelly. The captioning is in Polish. We need to change it to Ukraine. No. Second. If anybody has a question in the meanwhile, you're more than invited to ask. Ukraine.
Скажіть, будь ласка, ви кажете, що ваша організація займається і людьми з інвалідністю, і людьми похилого віку, так?
Yes, indeed.
Це цікава тема, тому що ми займаємося людьми похилого віку, сприянням активному довголіттю цих людей. В нашій країні діє майже ціла програма університети третього віку. Ну, це поки що так.
Okay, great, and we will get to that in a second. I'm going back to the presentation, and please let me know that it is now.
Ті колеги, які не змогли долучитися до нашої зустрічі зараз, вони просили, якщо можна, запис цієї зустрічі. Я бачу, що запис ведеться. Чи зможемо ми його отримати?
This meeting is recorded. Yes, yes. This meeting is recorded, and that should be no problem at all. Let me see just that, yes, we do have it. And now I'm sharing the screen again with your permission. Here we go. Is this okay, Katrina? Katrina, is this, since I do not know.
It's working.
That's
Everything
okay.
is okay.
Okay, good. Very good. So to make a long story short, this lady and her mom, she is blind, dialysis, on the way to Chelm. To make a long story short, I did find a volunteer that was waiting for them in Chelm. Unfortunately, once they got off the train, they didn't know how to recognize them. They saw some people with vests, and when they came to them, the people did not really know what to do with people with disabilities. So to make a long story short, again, we were able to connect them, and she went to dialysis and she's okay today. But I thought to myself, wouldn't it be beautiful if we take the purple from the building with the message leaving no one behind and put it on purple vests, and people will know that whoever is wearing a purple vest knows accessibility, knows how to communicate and assist people with disabilities, and will find solution to make evacuation at times of emergency or humanitarian aid at times of emergency more accessible and inclusive for all. And this is how the Purple Vest mission started. The idea is leaving no one behind and creating a global task force and methodology for accessible management in times of emergency. Now, this is not the subject of this lecture, but if you are interested in hearing more, please contact us. Please join the training, join the Purple Vest mission, and make sure that whether you're in a university or in a company or in an organization, at least there's one or two people there who in times of crisis will know what to do and how to assist people with disabilities, who can be employees, who can be family, who can be customers, etc. I can tell you that during the last year or so, until December 2022, we were able to evacuate about 4,000 people with disabilities and elderlies and their family, and assist more than 10,000 people with disabilities and elderlies in Ukraine who chose to stay behind. That is what it's all about. Now, when I'm talking about accessibility, let's first of all think about disability. Who is considered disabled? First of all, the UN calls it the largest minority in the world. We are talking about between 15 to 25% of the population, and the percentage is different, not because in one countries there are more and in others there's less, but rather because of the definition of disability. There are different definitions in different countries, and that is part of the reason that the statistics can vary. But we are talking about the largest minority, over 1 billion people with disabilities. And to what the gentleman referred to when we're talking about elderly, more than half of the elderly around the world have some form of disability, at least half. I always say that accessibility in a way is us being selfish, making sure that if we do live a long life, at the age of 99, we will all prefer a ramp, an elevator, and accessibility. So we are investing basically in our future. Now, in Israel, for example, I will give you a short trick on understanding what is considered a disability. Look at my hand over here. Can you imagine if I cut off my little finger? You know, I go to the manicure, pay for 10 fingers, get only 9 now. It's not really that big of a deal, right? I can still do everything I do on a daily basis, except, for example, if my profession is being a pianist, because a pianist who plays the piano needs all 10 fingers. So this impairment, the cutting off a finger, unless you're a pianist, most of the cases, it's not really a disability. It's not avoiding me to live my life to the fullest. If, on the other hand, the same exact thing happens with my thumb, all of a sudden, basic things in the kitchen, at work, on a daily basis, I cannot do because I don't have this clutch. And all of a sudden, the same exact thing, I'm missing a finger. The pinky finger is not really a disability according to this law. And the thumb, if it's really something that affects my life, that already is part of the statistics. So now if anybody asks you, if a person has allergy, is that a disability? If a person has mental disability, is that a disability in the statistics? I always ask, is it a pinky or is it a thumb? The anxiety attacks, are they just, you know, making you breathe a little heavy, but you can function normally? That's probably not really a mental disability that is part of the statistics we're talking about. It is more of a pinky example. But on the other hand, if your anxieties cause you like post-trauma, you cannot leave your house, you cannot function, you cannot work, that's already a thumb, and that is disability that is part of this statistics. If I'm allergic to food, is it just redness around my lips and that's it? Well, that's probably a pinky. I can still live and eat and do everything. But if it's something that can suffocate me, that is already a thumb. So always remember, when you're considering whether learning disability, dyslexia, autism, and etc., whether it is a disability that we are referring to, always think of the hand and try to think if it's a thumb or a pinky. And when we're talking disabilities, we're talking about all disabilities. physical, visual, hearing, mental, intellectual, communicative. I can tell you that when we assisted organizations in Turkey, they were surprised, at least one of them was surprised, that I'm considering people with post-trauma as part of the disabilities that we need to help. Well, post-trauma, when it's a thumb disability, when it's something that is crucial, of course, it is a disability that with accessible service, you can overcome and assist, especially in times of crisis. Now, just a little short break here from a long presentation. Terminology. Guys, I want you to go back home today with already homework. No more using the terminology disabled or crippled or handicapped. Handicapped is a terminology that is used, for example, for many years, for decades in the US. You know what handicap is? Handicap is hand in cap. And if you can look at me, what I'm doing now, hand in cap, like I'm begging, because what else can a person with disability do? When we are talking about awareness raising, when we're talking about inclusion in the workplace and in general in society, we have to remember that terminology plays a part. We have to remember to change the terminology, and the terminology we're using today around the world is a person with disability, a person who is blind, a person who is deaf. He's first and foremost a person. Some of the disabilities are visible. You can see the wheelchair, you can see the guide dog, you can see the facial features of Down syndrome, for example. But others are invisible. A person with hearing disability, today the hearing aids can be very, very small, or some people ignore the fact they need hearing aids and will not even wear ones. So you can't really see the disability. The same goes with mental, with learning disability, etc., etc. Many times after a couple of minutes, you can detect that there is a disability there, but you cannot see it. Now, there's a whole big question. What is better? That I see a disability or that I don't? And I can tell you that there's no one answer. It's very individual. There are people who say, I prefer that nobody will see my disability. I don't want the stigma. But others say, I prefer that people will see my disability. That way I don't have to explain myself time and time again. So this is something very individual. Now, what is access? Any questions about disabilities, by the way? And Katrina, because I'm not seeing all of the people, if there's anyone asking questions, please let me know. If there's no questions, I'll continue to the next term, accessibility. What is accessibility? Well, accessibility is, first of all, the ability to reach a destination. Now, I can tell you that for many years, accessibility stopped at that. Let's have the ramp, let's have the parking space, let's have the entrance of the door wide enough, and that's it, you're in. Now it's accessible, but is it really? When I go, for example, to school, or when I go to the municipality, or when I go to a shelter, is it enough to just enter? Is that why I am there? To come home and say, yay, today I had a good day. I was able to enter school and come back. Of course not. Because when you enter a building, you come there for a purpose. You come there to receive services everybody else is receiving. So the next type of accessibility is to get the services that are provided there. And another part of it is using the facility. If there are any kinds of kiosks, if there are any kinds of, you go to a bank and you want to take out money, there's the ATM. Is it accessible for the blind? Is it accessible for wheelchairs, etc., etc.? So accessibility is not just getting to a place, but using whatever services and facilities are offered to everybody else, just like everyone else. People with disabilities, that's what they want. They don't want special treatment. They want to be able to live their life to the fullest like everybody else does. Safely, equally, rightfully, respectfully, comfortably, and with maximum independence, without disappointment and without special help. By the way, in Israel for many years, there was physical accessibility, but it was always, as long as you can get in, that's enough. Nobody really bothered with the fact that people with disabilities entrance was from the back, from the garbage place, from the, not in the main door like everybody else. When we're talking about accessibility today, globally, we are talking about universal design, about being able to enter like everybody else, receive services like everybody else, and use the facilities that everybody else uses. What are the principles of accessibility? Well, the principles of accessibility are, first of all, inclusion. As I said just now, be included, not secluded. In the past, accessibility was talking about equal, but separate. Let's have a place. One of the first meetings I had in Access Israel about 15 years ago was somebody who came and said, listen, I just came back from Turkey. There was an amazing club there with food and with shows and with everything. And I want to build like something like that for people with disabilities. I'll have, there's shows there. I'll have shows in my hotel. There's a great sleeping place. I'll have sleeping accommodations in my hotel. Food, everything will be the same. So Yuval said, great, so I can come with my family. And he said, no. There are so many people with disabilities around the world and in Israel. That place will be just for the people with disabilities. Their families can go to the regular ones. Well, no, that's not accessibility. Accessibility is inclusion, being able to do everything with everyone else. The next one is sequence, and this is crucial. If you're talking about your workplace, if you're talking about a university, you can put in efforts to become accessible as much as you want. But if there's one step along the sequence, one step along the way that is not accessible, then the entire work you put in is basically not worth it. Because if I have an accessible building, if I have an accessible parking lot, everything is great, but the pavement from the parking lot to the building has obstacles, well, people in wheelchairs will not be able to come there. People who are blind will not be able to walk there without tripping or independently. So when we're talking accessibility, always look at the sequence. When I was advising on accessibility of evacuations in Ukraine, we started from the information that a person has to gather in order to decide whether he wants to be evacuated until safety. And then that information and coming to his house and taking him down and putting him on transportation and taking him to the border and what happens at the border in every single step and what happens once he's after the border and until he reaches a safe place. All of this is a sequence, and we need to make sure that every step along the way, accessibility is being considered. So the principle of sequencing is extremely important when talking about accessibility. The last one is flexibility and availability. Now, guys, I'm 16 years lecturing about accessibility, and I can tell you that no matter how great you are in accessibility, I promise you, there will always be some problems. I'll give you an example. There was a gas station that we consulted once. They did training. They made everything accessible there. Everything was really perfect. But one day, the cleaning lady decided to clean extra hard, and she moved the vending machine and cleaned behind it. That's great, right? It's more clean. The problem is when she put back the vending machine, she didn't put it exactly in the right place. And the place she put it made the door not able to open all the way to the end. And that caused a person in a wheelchair not to be able to enter because the door didn't open entirely. So it doesn't matter how much you thought about inclusion, how much you looked at every step on the sequence, things can happen. And when things like this happen, we have to have the flexibility of finding solutions and the availability. It's not enough to have an accessible toilet with a sign saying, if you need to the toilets, call this number. Because I don't know what about you. When I need to the toilets, I need to go to the toilets. I'm not now going to call a number and wait for somebody to come and open the accessible stools. So flexibility in the case of the gas station that I was telling you about is once you provide service training on accessibility, you encourage the people to be more flexible, more sensitive, raise their heads, find and detect obstacles before they become obstacles. And once there is an obstacle, find solutions quickly. These are all principles of accessibility. Now, we are concentrating today on employment. Everything that I said here up till now has to do with inclusive employment, because you have to understand what you're supposed to provide and who you're providing it to. Now, in Israel, I can tell you the statistics is that unemployment rate for people with disability is about twice as much as that of people without disabilities. We're talking in Israel on about 460,000 people of prime working age that are basically unemployed. And this is something we are trying both in Israel and around the world to change. I think that in a way, COVID made a big difference, because there are many people with disabilities who for many years stayed at home because every workplace they went to told them, you have to come physically to work in order to work here. Well, transportation is not always making it possible. There's not accessible transportation necessarily to all places and from all places. Maybe the offices themselves, the building themselves were not accessible enough, etc. But what happened in COVID? All of a sudden, we all had to work from home, and all of a sudden, it was possible. Things that we were told for many years no were all of a sudden a big yes. And I can tell you that COVID in Israel and across the world opened a lot of opportunities for people with disabilities who cannot leave their houses to still be productive and work. We all now require systems, digital systems, to sign in and to have Zoom meetings, even lectures like we're having now. And this was not possible when it was not done a lot before COVID started. Now, what are the challenges of inclusive employment? First and foremost, we have the stigmas. I can tell you that in one of the conferences that we made, one of the HR people of a very large company came and said, listen, a person in a wheelchair, does he wash himself every day? Is it hygiene to be next to him? And I'm talking about a big company. That was the stigma that was in their mind. That was the cause that caused the reluctance to employ them. We don't want to, do bad for them and do bad for the people around them. Inaccessibility of the workspace. That is a big problem that we hear and find about a lot. And the idea is we have to remember that, first of all, there are various disabilities. Even if your office is in a place that physically a wheelchair cannot come there, there are other disabilities that might be included. People who are deaf, people who are blind, people with mental disability, people with cognitive disability that can overcome steps and can be included in a workplace if the job fits and if the people fit. It's not that I'm urging you, whatever person with disability you meet, bring him to work just to say that you're employing people with disabilities. We have to make sure we're matching the right person to the right job, just as we do with everybody else. Disability makes it no different. So inaccessibility of a workplace is something we need to overcome, but you don't need the same accessibility for all disabilities. Inaccessibility of transportation to work, I can tell you, at least in Israel, the big cities usually have accessible transportation. But once you live in the peripheria and you want to go from far away to up north in Israel to a workplace in the next large city, many times there's no public transportation that is accessible and available. Maybe once a day. It's not enough if you need to go to work and get back at a normal hour. So transportation is a problem. And here we have to see if we have solutions, whether it's accessible transportation that the workplace organizes, or, as we said, solutions of telling the person, come once a month to the office. And other than that, you can work remotely like many do anyway. Difficulty locating workers with disabilities. Well, here I can tell you that you remember the sequence of accessibility I was talking about? There is also a sequence of locating available employees, because we have to remember, in order for me to recruit now an engineer to my company, or a professor or a lecturer to my organization or university, I need somebody that completed school, went into higher education, completed his higher education, passed whatever exams, and now is looking for work exactly in the field that I'm looking for. And many times, if the schools are not accessible, they won't finish schools and get to higher education. And for those who do finish schools, many times the higher education is not accessible, et cetera, et cetera. And another example I will give you, you know the small company Microsoft? Well, I can tell you that one of the great stories that Jenny LaFleur, who is the accessibility chief accessibility officer in Microsoft, once told in a conference, is that she came to the HR once and said, guys, I want you now to recruit people with autism. Great. An ad was drafted, published, and CVs started to come back to the company. After a couple of days, she went to HR and asked, so how's it going? Did we find any employees with autism? And the answer was, listen, we found a bunch of 500 CVs came, but maybe we have 2 or 3 for the, for doing movement of things in the mahsan, how do we say, in the storage room, and maybe a cleaning crew, not really anything more than that. And she asked to see a bunch of the CVs, and she started going over it. And you know what she saw? What do we have in a CV? We start with the name and details of us, and then we continue with our last work of employment. And then as we scroll down on the CV, we get to where we studied and maybe languages we know, etc. Now, when HR receives now hundreds and hundreds of CVs, what do? They screen the CVs very quickly. And in Microsoft, they did the same. And they stopped at the last work of employment. Many of the CVs of the people with autism, what did they have there? They worked in the supermarket, putting in groceries into a bag or things of that sort. They didn't really continue to scroll down and see that, hey, this guy completed a doctor in computer science, but because of his autism, up till now, he was not employed anywhere using his education and his skills. So when we are talking about difficulty of locating employees that with disability, that's one side of it. The second is locating ones who have the capabilities, but really making sure our HR is able to screen them. Many times, and this is connected with stigmas, we have employers who are opposing the employment of people with disabilities. They are afraid, they are reluctant. And let's put it on the table. And many times, they can be disgusted. They can be, no, we don't want, it doesn't make me feel good. This is something we as an employer have to fight. This is the stigma that we need to make sure is stopped. And it's not something that happens by miracle. I can tell you, and I'll be very honest, when I started to work in Access Israel 16 years ago, the first day I was sitting at this table and the IT guy was somebody who had no legs and no fingers. And he's the IT guy. And when he had to come and fix my computer, he jumped on the table and moved like this on the table and fixed everything and left. And even shook my hand. And then I felt that he has no fingers. I can tell you that when I got home that day, I told my husband, Mikey, they're amazing. The organization does amazing things, but I'm too sensitive. There's no chance I will be able to stay and work with people who make me feel conscious and make me feel bad. And my husband gave me a great word of advice. He said, wait 1 month. If you feel that after 1 month, then you can quit. A week later, I already did not see the disability. I saw the people. By the way, some of them are really annoying, like everybody else. They are people. And once you provide the opportunity of working side by side them, all of a sudden, a lot of the stigmas can disappear. As I said before, as part of the sequence, we have to make sure there's accessibility to educational institutions and professional trainings. And those are all challenges that happens, and we have to make sure they are overcome in order to have true inclusive employment. Now, in Israel, we have the umbrella law of equal rights for people with disabilities. And again, I'm reminding you, 20 years ago, there was no legislation. There were no laws in Israel for accessibility. We were a country that was not accessible at all. And 23 years ago, the first equal rights law was basically legislated. And that law said that every ministry has to make sure that there are regulations for accessibility under his supervision. So educational ministry has to have regulations on accessibility in education. The same goes for transportation and health, etc., etc. So today we have regulations on accessibility, with the service accessibility being probably the most elaborate, or one of the most elaborate in the world, maybe too elaborate sometimes. And then we have the standards, Israeli accessibility standards, which are like the fine tuning on giving exact measurements. How wide should the door be, or how tall should the chair be, etc. The uniqueness of Israeli accessibility legislation is, first of all, that every service provider in Israel, and listen to this because this is very unique, every service provider in Israel has to go through training every single year on accessible services. Meaning, think about the coffee shop you go to drink coffee every day. Think about the university you go to study at. Think about the municipality you go to pay your bills, or think about times of emergency where you're trying to get services from an ambulance or from health service providers. Each one of these people in Israel have to go through accessible training every single year. And at least once, the legislator adopted what Access Israel has been doing for the last 2 decades, and that is experiential training. It's not enough to hear lectures. Let's have everybody sit on a chair, cover your eyes, cover your ears, try to receive the services that you're providing from a point of view of a person with disability. And this is something that is mandatory in Israel at least once. And I can tell you that last month, we had a great training for representatives of districts from Ukraine that did experiences like this in the streets of Krakow. And it was amazing to see how they got it, how their sensitivity was, fine-tuned. And we see it all over the world. The next thing that is unique in Israeli legislation is we have a profession by law called an accessibility expert that has to go to university, has to go through a test, have to be registered, and they're the one that signs any permit to open a new place of business, a new restaurant, etc., because they have to have accessibility there. And another thing is accessibility coordinator. Every service provider in Israel that has more than 25 employees has to have one employee be the accessibility coordinator, the go-to guy between the customers with disabilities and the organization itself. And this is a very unique thing, which I'm a true believer in. And I recommend each and every one of you in your workplace designate that person. You can have that person wear a purple vest and go through training so he can be your go-to guy in times of emergency also. But the idea is to have that designated person that people can go to when they have questions about accessibility. In Israel, we are a small country after all, so accessibility here is countrywide. I mean, if there's a coffee shop that has branches in the center of Israel and up north and down south, they have to be accessible all the way. And last, our law has teeth. It's not just the right for accessibility, it's also what happens when you do not provide that right. And the law has ways, even criminal charges in some cases, and of course fines and courts can cause you to pay damages in a very high amount, etc. And another important thing, each and every one of you that are sitting here and say, you know what, Michal, you've got me convinced. I want to go back and I'm going to make a change. And you know what? I'm going to be that coordinator. Well, in Israel, there's another requirement that every organization that has, let's say, a website that publishes the services or markets the services has to write and publish, one, the accessibility arrangements that they have, even if it's not perfect, and two, the name of the accessibility coordinator, so people with disability will find it easy to contact. Think about a workplace. We know that the equal rights law requires an employer not to discriminate its employees or job seekers because of their disabilities, not when they are trying to accept them to work, not in the working conditions, any promotions that you can get in work, any education or trainings that you're providing everyone, and of course, also when you get to termination or benefits or payments. This is by law in Israel. Now, in Israel, we have a very unique case where the inclusion in employment did not start from the government. In 2014, there was basically a decision by the unions in Israel that any organization, any employer with more than 100 employees will have to have one person that is designated like the accessibility coordinator, but in the HR for inclusive employment, and that 5%, 3% to 5%, it depends what time we are in and what type of company you are, 3 to 5% of your employees have to be people with disabilities. Now, I don't know if you are aware of it, but there's a whole big discussions globally. Is a quota system good? If I come and say 3% of your employees, that means out of 100, 3 employees have to be with disabilities. Well, is that a good thing? Now, on the one hand, hey, 3 people with disabilities are not sitting at home. They're working. That's great. The bad thing is that many times we see employers checking the box, saying, wait a second, I saw this guy with a limb. Hey, come here, guy. You are now my designated one person with disability employed in my organization. And they do it just to, meet the quota. Of course, those are 2 extremes. We do not want you to have people with disabilities just to check the box. We want true inclusion in the workplace, but quota, I can tell you, in Israel started the process. Employers started looking out for people with disabilities. And the change that occurred in Israel in the past 6 years is absolutely amazing. So it originated, as I said, from the private sector. And then the government said, wait a second. You can't be the good guys and we're the bad guys. And they came and said, we will require all governmental organizations to hire not 3%, but 5% people with disabilities. So it's 3% for the private sector and 5% for government and public sector. As I said, appointment of a director of inclusive employment that ensures the proper representation and promotion of people with disabilities in the workplace. Now, here I must tell you the best study cases that we have on the implementation of this is when the people who are the coordinator of accessibility in general are working closely with the director of inclusive employment. It is that connection there to create an atmosphere in the workplace that is more inclusive. We have to make sure, and this is again part of the expansion order, we have to make and publish an implementation work plan for inclusive employment. And in the Ministry of Labor, they established a unit for advancement of inclusive employment. And today that unit provides training for employers. I can tell you that Access Israel is providing both training and consulting for workplaces and employers on how to make inclusive employment possible. Now, I want to share with you a little story. In one of the banks we consult, they decided to hire people who are with disability of hearing. So they took out an ad and they interviewed a lady that had a disability. She didn't want to really talk about it, but she had a disability. She was good for the quota, and they let her enter the workplace. Now, a couple of months after she started working there, we came as part of our consultation and asked, so how is it going? And the answer we received was, listen, sometimes she's the best employee ever, does exactly and precisely what we want. But other times, very strangely, she just sits back and does nothing. And they didn't really know what to do, and they were on the verge of firing her. Now, when we started asking questions and consulting and talking to the people, you know what it turns out? Her employer was a lady that was known to chew gum. Now, can you think of a person with hearing disability that doesn't want to tell everybody that he has hearing disabilities, and he lives his life reading lips? Now, if I'm reading lips of a person that chews gum, I don't really know when it is a chew and when it is a word that they're saying. And that is what caused the problem. When the manager did not chew gum, the employee knew exactly what she's saying and delivered. When she was chewing gum, she didn't really understand and didn't want to say anything. With right training, we always say putting the seeds of inclusive employment in the ground is not enough. You have to make sure the ground is fertile, the ground is ready, the ground is watered and continuously done so in order to enable those seeds to flourish. So this is just one example. Now, in Israel, we have individual accommodations in employment and state participation. Now, note, what is accommodation? When you have an employee with disability come to your workplace and requires accommodation, for example, a person in a wheelchair will need to be able to maneuver into the room and enter and sit behind the desk, or a person with hearing disability will not be able to work in a place that is full of noise, and he cannot really have that intimacy and hear the things that he's being talked to. A blind person, and note, not all blind person are blind in the same way. There are blind people who can still see silhouettes, who can still see light and dark. And if the lighting in a place is not good enough, well, they cannot, it's glare in their eyes, they will not be able to concentrate, they will not be able to work. So there are accommodations that are different for various disabilities. And we have to understand also that if we have an inclusive employment with various disabilities, sometimes accessibility for one can be an obstacle for another. So we also have to be sensitive to that too. So accommodation is any change, any addition, any accessory required for an employee with disability for the performance of the work and for daily functioning in the workplace. So it's the physical environment, it's assistive devices. For example, a blind person can have an assistive device that reads emails for him and reads websites if he has to go into a website. Procedures that are fit and accommodating accessibility in the workplace. The way the tasks are performed. Do I have to do it standing up, or is it possible to do it while sitting down? And then I'll be able to do it even if I have a back problem, even if I sit in a wheelchair. The schedule, how important is it? Is my work has to be done in a very limited time? Because if so, there are disabilities that will not be able to work in such a pressure. But otherwise, if they are given extra time, they can do a superb work. And it won't cost the employee anything else. Human help in some cases is needed. Translation is needed. One of the most inspiring panels that I attended last year was a panel that was led by a person with speech disability. Nobody really could, or not nobody, most people will not understand what they're saying, but they have an interpreter translating what they're saying because they know what they mean when they talk. And of course, the training. As I said, we have to nourish the ground. We're putting seeds of inclusive employment too. And the goal is adapting the workplace to the person, not adapting the person to the workplace. Any questions up till now? I see no, so I will continue. Guys, you know, everybody has their disability. Mine is when you give me a microphone, I can just go on and on and on. So I will continue with your permission. If you have any questions or you have anything to say, please let me know. So here's a couple of examples, just so we will heighten our sensitivity. This is an accessible toilet. Well, at least it was when it was planned. But what happens many times in a workplace? That's the perfect place to store all the toilet papers, all the, you know, files that are waiting and piled up and we don't have anywhere else to put them. The problem is this turns this accessible toilets into not accessible, because a wheelchair user cannot enter and maneuver inside of the room in a way that he'll be able to use toilets. Here you see a workplace that said, okay, we have to put a ramp. Well, they did, but look where they put the ramp. Of course, when you're talking about accessibility, the details, the small details is what counts. And we have to remember to make sure that when we put a ramp, we put it in the right place. Here, in a workplace, they understood they need signs and accessible signs. And they were bragging about the contrast of the white and the gray, and people who are colorblind will be able to see it. And this is great. But the problem is, if I'm with a cognitive disability, or if I'm even Michal, I'm looking at this and I'm looking for the toilets and I'm not sure where the arrow is pointing. Okay, accessibility would be adding an arrow, a little stick to the arrow, so I will know what direction the arrow is pointing at. So it's good intention, but the small details are the ones who make it inaccessible. Now, when we're talking accessibility at the workplace, what do we need to make sure is accessible? Number one is the hiring process. And I gave you the example from Microsoft. We have to make sure that the hiring process is accessible, that the HR people know how to read, how to, first of all, draft an ad that talks to people with disability and publishes it in a place that they will be exposed to it, how to receive CVs and read them through in a way that is accessible. And I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this, but in the workplace today, many large organizations rely on AI to screen their candidates. There are AI ways to analyze if an employee is good for the position or is not. And they look at the facial expressions, at your ability to look forward and focus. What if I have features that are due to my disability? I can tell you many of the AI machines will not screen you through. What if I cannot look in the eyes, but I'm still a great employee? I'm still very smart. I can do whatever you want. I just have autism and I don't look at you in your face. Is that a reason to exclude me from joining a workplace? We have now globally initiatives that are going through the AI methodology and AI solutions, trying to see how we can make them accessible by design. Another thing is the physical accessibility, the parking lot, the building, the restrooms, the restaurant, anywhere that people, other employees are hanging out, need to be accessible for all. Digital accessibility is our website, our intranet, accessible for all. You know what, even going back to both digital and physical, can you imagine when we go into a workplace and we have to pass our card, our employee ID card to show my workplace that I have arrived to the office? Well, what if I have a problem with my hands? Yuval cannot hold a card in his hand. How does he do that? That machine should also be accessible. And many times it is not. Communications. How is the communication done internally in the office? Is it done in an accessible way? If I am deaf and working side by side you, and now there's a big meeting with many people, I cannot read lips of everybody at once. Did you bring a sign language interpreter? Is there captioning? And you know what? What you see here, the captioning on top of my presentation in Ukraine, this is something that you should be aware of because it doesn't cost me anything. It's not extra costs. It's just knowledge and sensitivity. Today, there are solutions by Google, by Microsoft, by other companies that are free. We're all having it on our cell phones, on our computers, and we don't understand that they are accessible. If a person is with learning disabilities, it's very difficult for him to follow through in a meeting. If you have a presentation like this, even if you're not using a presentation, just open it up with the captioning, have one slide, and the captioning will run throughout the meeting. That way, people who are with difficulty of hearing or with learning disabilities or mental disabilities that can get anxious and zoom out and need to zoom in again, will have the captioning to help them. This is technology coming and making the workplace more accessible. That's for meetings and gatherings, for lectures, for training that we're doing. And of course, we have to remember, we don't come to the workplace just to work. There's a lot of social aspects in the workplace. We have to make sure that those social events, whether it's something for the holidays that we're throwing, a party, a farewell party from someone, or anything else, these events should also be accessible. Bring into consideration the employees with disabilities. Is anyone in a wheelchair? Is anyone even with, broke his leg and now for the last month cannot really go upstairs? So let's do the event on the bottom floor so he can be part of everybody else, etc., etc. Any questions on that? Okay, I guess I'm really good that you have no questions, or at least I hope so. So, you know what is accessibility? You know what is disability? We spoke about the challenges of inclusive workplace, and we spoke about the things that we need to take into consideration when making an inclusive workplace. Why should we, though? So there is the law in many countries, but regardless of the law, let's put the law aside. Why should we encourage inclusive employment? And I can tell you, I always introduce myself as Michal Rimon, the proud CEO of Access Israel. Proud of our accomplishments, proud of our projects, but most of all, proud of the people, the volunteers, the partners, and my employees. More than half of my more than 100 employees are people with disabilities, all types of disabilities, visible disabilities and non-visible disabilities, physical, sensual, and non-visible, cognitive, autism, and mental disability. And I am a very lucky CEO to have such a, varied workplace. First of all, I'm expanding the supply of candidates for recruitment. My pool of candidates is bigger than those of an employer who does not want people with disabilities in his organization. And when I'm promoting employment diversity, I'm changing the DNA of my organization. People get the message that everyone can sit around the table. And you know what? Things change in life. Disability is not only something you're born with, it's something that can occur to you in the middle of your life. And if you have that message of diversity in your employment place, well, that's a very important message to state out there. We have your back, guys. You're part of us. As long as you can and as long as you want, you can be part of our organization. We're creating a positive organizational climate. Increase the circle of customers. There are those who, when they see employees, service providers that are people with disabilities, they want to go and give business to that place. I can tell you in Israel, there are a lot of great campaigns for that. In Israel, as I said, legal compliance, every country it differs, and doing the right thing. I can tell you that in Access Israel, it's very difficult for somebody to come and say, oh, I'm so tired. It's so difficult for me to sit for hours in the office. When next to you, there's a person with disability that for him or for her, it's much more difficult. When you see and work side by side, shoulder by shoulder with people with disabilities that cope with challenges beyond what a normal, quote unquote, person copes with, well, your eagerness to complain diminishes substantially, I can tell you. What can a workplace do in order to truly welcome employees with disabilities? So number one, stop making assumptions. You are not a doctor. Nobody is coming to you as a doctor. A disability is not a medical diagnosis, a tragedy, a charity case. Stop thinking that you, the well-abled person, not the disabled person, you will help. You are the Superman coming to the rescue. Not at all. You're not doing anyone a favor. Stop making assumptions that you know what is best for them. Even when we do service training, accessible service training, we always say, never make assumptions. Don't be paternalistic. First, don't assume they need help. Ask them, do they need help? And if so, they should tell you what help they need and how they want that help to be provided. Number two, rethink accessibility. There's a benefit in creating spaces with disability and accessibility in mind for everyone. Again, as I said, I can break my leg one day, and then for the next month, I need an accessible surrounding in order to come to work every day. Or, you know, a place that is lit in the right way for a person with visual disabilities is probably lit in a better way for everyone. And the same goes with meetings that you say, don't talk all at once, because we have here people with hearing disabilities, and we want them to be able to read lips, so we want them to be able to see the captioning of each and every one. Well, guess what? Don't we all concentrate better when not everyone is talking at once? So accessibility surrounding in the workplace is better for us all. And the last thing is embrace flexibility. Provide the option to work remotely, flexible hours, meeting specific needs of people. These are examples of trainings that we provide for employment places with the knowledge that we give, getting to know the person behind the disability, and of course, the experiential part. The results of the Israeli model, I always say, there is a half full glass and a half empty glass. The half empty glass assures that I still have employment and I have job security for the next several years, because I know there's a lot to do still. But the half full glass is that the laws created a change, a real improvement in inclusive employment, and people with disabilities are now starting to stop hiding their disability in CVs. There's an increased demand for people with disabilities, and new opportunities are being opened up all the time. The empty half glass is, as we discussed before, there is still a lack of sufficient capable candidates with disabilities. And this is a process that we need to go back to the educational system, make sure that education, both lower and higher education, is accessible in order to bring out people with disabilities with the knowledge and the skills that we need in the workplace. Lack of sufficient trainings of workplace. The positions mostly open for people with disabilities are basic jobs. This is something we need to work on. And many people with disabilities are still afraid to leave, because I don't know how it goes in Ukraine, but in Israel, there's the financial rewards that unfortunately they are built in a way that if you go out to work many times, you lose money and not just gain money. The future's challenge, and this is where I'm ending, and then I'll be open for questions. First of all, it's important to raise awareness with CEOs to understand and believe that it is good for business, and it is good for business, but saying it is not enough. We have to make sure from the head of the organization, they believe in inclusive employment. We need to improve incentives for people with disabilities to start working. That is usually on a national level with all the laws of financial aid, etc. professionally or academically, we need to make sure there's training for people with disabilities so they can be hired for higher jobs and higher wages. Managers and co-workers, this is crucial. This is, as I said, making the ground ready for the seeds of inclusive employment. Where people with disabilities are hired, we have to have training in order to enable long-term success. We need to train and develop employed people with disabilities so they can advance, not just be stuck in the same position they got entered into the organization to the first place. Innovations in recruiting people with disabilities. I was talking about AI and other methodology that we need to take into account. Training for the HR people, training in the universities for those studying HR, so they will be more understanding and more sensitive to the needs of people with disabilities. Internal software that is used in an organization has to be accessible. I don't know how many of you are aware of the fact that a blind person and a deaf person and a person with cognitive disability can surf the web, can use technology just as well as we can, as long as it is accessible. And developing technologies to improve successful employment. And I can tell you again, going back to Purple Vest, there are many technologies out there that can make evacuations more accessible and can make daily workplace more accessible. And they're not even thought about as accessibility solutions. I mentioned Google, Microsoft. I don't think that, this captioning, when I purchased Word Office for my workplace, I wasn't thinking about accessibility, but hey, it makes it more accessible. And the conclusion, 10 commandments for integrating employees with disabilities. 1, we need to do an analysis and make sure which adjustments needs to be taken place. Flexibility and creativity, I'm reminding you. Equal treatment. Share with and include like anyone else. People with disabilities are not looking for special treatment. Remember that. Don't be afraid to talk, to ask questions, to criticize, to invite. Again, you know how when you talk to a blind person and say, oh, you have to see this, and then you become nervous and say, oh my God, I said see and you cannot see and I'm so sorry. Guys, relax. People who are blind use this terminology also. Don't be nervous. Feel free next to the person with disability. We also train people with disabilities that are part of the workplace to, enable and encourage questions. Because once you ask the questions, once that stigma and that, glass ceiling or glass wall is broken, inclusion is much more natural. Create procedures for integrating people with disabilities as employees and adapt the internal procedures accordingly. And again, Purple Vest, what can I do? This is my mantra. So emergency evacuation. Are we thinking of our people with disabilities, employees with disabilities, when we are talking about emergency evacuations at our workplace? Feedback is crucial. It's important that you provide feedback to that lady with hearing disabilities in the bank that I was telling you about, because then maybe she would have said early on, I cannot understand what you're saying when you're chewing gum. Feedback has to be mutual. Listen to the employee, don't just hear him, and voice out your concerns or your challenges. And think about the employee with disabilities and their need in any organizational activity. Again, we're not coming only to work, we're coming also for the social aspects. Create the culture that will be inclusive, be sensitive to the employee, and remember what I said before. Always don't be paternalistic. Ask the employee, do you need help? Don't assume they need help. And if so, how can I help you? I spoke a lot. I apologize. I'm unsharing now my, so I'll be able to see you guys. I hope you all survived this lecture. And now it's your turn to ask questions. And I see, Katrina, that there's some things in the chat. Is it addressed to me? No, I see that's okay. So please, if anybody has a question, now is a good time to do it.
Є таке невеличке Є невеличке запитання, шановна пані Міхал. Я представляю Одеський інститут соціальних технологій. Це громадська організація. І в мене таке запитання. От все, про що ви кажете, воно потребує такого комплексного, спільного підходу до цієї вашої всієї діяльності. Тобто мають бути і влада, і громадськість, і бізнес, і всі вони мають співпрацювати в цьому напрямку. От як вам вдається, завдяки чому поєднати ці всі? І хто є ініціатором цієї співпраці? От скажіть, будь ласка.
I am so happy you asked the question, because it means that I didn't stress to you the situation in Israel when Access Israel was established. When we were established, we had no laws. The government was not with us. The word accessibility was not used. And Access Israel was still able to convince businesses to turn more accessible and to employ people with disabilities before legislation even required it. And the way we did it is with the Access Israel model, which I gave you a couple of tips about it. First of all, we have to go all the way to the top. We have to make your board members, your CEO, your organization managers understand the importance on a social level, on economic level, because a more accessible business is a more profitable business. You're providing services. You want to be providing service to 100% of your potential customer pool, not just to 80%. And when we take all of these things together, there's a methodology that you go through, and you can create a change without the government being part of it. Specifically, I can tell you that I have been fortunate to work alongside representatives of your government. Tatiana, I'm very bad with last names. Lomakina, for example, and her office. Amazing. I was able to see a person that is a true believer in making this change. Her position on Ukraine without borders, she is doing it. She wants it. So I think that you have the right people to work with in the government, but don't wait for the government with everything that they have to do in order to create the change in your organization. Start from the heads of the organizations, go through the training, the bringing the, showing the person behind the disability. And here, Katrina, you can reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to share with you methodology, training materials, presentations, videos, and do training for you. Because the idea is, I always say, take the human factor and turn it into a human ramp. Thank you. Any other questions?
Дуже дякую.
Thank
I
you.
will put in a chart our websites. So a lot of really important information already there. You can use the English, Ukrainian, Chinese, etc. languages.
Katrina, if you can also
I
put
would
in
like-
the Access Israel website.
Okay.
It definitely has information about employment and others. Any other questions? That big group sitting around the table so nicely. I hope you're all with me because I can't see your faces.
זה מרכז תעסוקה.
Yeah, any questions you might have? Any examples maybe, challenges that you guys faced? I guess I was so good at my lecture that everybody is totally convinced and you have no questions whatsoever.
I
So
would like to share more technology, Michal, if it's possible. The sign now, just can you describe? I'll find
of course, the idea is, as I said before, when we have, when we're talking accessibility, there are a lot of technologies that are really a way to turn accessibility more available, and usually not really that expensive. I spoke to you about Google and about Microsoft, but I can tell you, for example, when we were volunteering in Przemyśl, which is on the Polish border, a big refugee center that received a lot of people who were crossing the border from Ukraine. I was there doing experiential training for volunteers. And I swear, this is not a story, this is truth. I was in the middle of the sentence explaining to people why accessibility is so important for volunteers in such centers, when two volunteers brought a lady, a Ukrainian lady, that it turns out she was deaf, an elderly lady. She didn't write, she was deaf. I'll tell you the truth, she looked so tired after hours and hours of evacuating Ukraine and crossing the border. And she was trying to convey a message, and nobody spoke sign language, Ukrainian sign language. Nobody understood. There were people there speaking sign language in other languages, but I don't know if you know, sign language is very cultural. If you speak Ukrainian sign language, it's not the same sign language that is used in the US or in Israel. So nobody really understood what she wants to say. They came to me in the middle of the training, and I couldn't believe it because it was the best example for my training. It took me 2 minutes to put on my cell phone Sign Now, which Katrina put in the chat now. It's a website that enables online immediate translators in sign language in various languages from all over the world. Meaning if you have a volunteer from Congo and talking to a refugee from Ukraine, they can communicate in sign language, because the two interpreters, each in each language, will be able to convey their messages. And we had a sign language interpreter in Ukraine in 2 minutes, and we understood her daughter is waiting for her in Bern in Germany, and that evening she was already on a car on the way to her daughter. Technology made it possible.
And I want to share the Right Here application. And they told me that this is actually working in Ukrainian.
In Ukraine, yeah. So Right Here is navigation.
No, I mean a Ukrainian language. They can have a description in Ukrainian.
So we have two such navigation systems. We have Right Here and we have Step Here. The whole idea is when a person who is blind wants to navigate in the workplace, in the train station, do the transportation all the way, or in a refugee center, doesn't matter. In order to gain independence, a navigation system enables him through an application to walk around and receive personal instructions on, walk 10 steps and turn right in order to go to the bathroom. Now, take 5 steps and take a left, and after that, there is a big door on your right. Now, this can be done in any language. And this is something that is relatively not even that expensive and can be done in a workplace, in a university, in a hospital, and it is spread in various places all over the world. And again, it's an example of technology. And when we're talking about other solutions for technology, I'll give you an example. We were now at the UN, and as part of Purple Vest, we wanted to show the UN not just to talk, let them really experience. And in the middle of the panel that I was participating in, all of a sudden I turned on the alarm and I did an evacuation drill for the UN people at the UN. But I said, wait, don't do it regular. Let's try it with a disability. And all of a sudden they were sitting in wheelchairs or covering their eyes or covering their ears and trying to escape the building. Now, I can tell you that one of the examples we gave them, because I told you that Access Israel comes and does all disabilities in all areas of life, is an application by a company called Ta'al, which basically breaks down for people with autism or people with cognitive disability breaks down a process. Now, the process can be the workplace. For example, if I want to hire somebody from McDonald's to work in the kitchen, I take this application and I do a step-by-step picture, video explanation on what he needs to do. Enter the kitchen, go to the sink, wash your hand, put soap, wash the soap, dry your hands, go to the station and peel the tomato, okay? That is an example of Tal working in various pictures. It's good for people who are elderly, by the way, who, you know, maybe have some dementia, Alzheimer, they're forgetting to do basic things. This is something that shows step by step. Now, in times of emergency, it's also amazing because once the siren turns on, the application can give you a step-by-step on how to evacuate, what to expect, how to calm down. Again, technology, taking a disability, taking a challenge, and finding a solution. Any questions? Well, I see that we're really good and even on time. Guys, a lot of information was given out to you and it needs to sink in. And some of you maybe are coming statistically from families with people with disabilities, employee places with people with disabilities, and can sit back and say, I knew most of the things that Michal just spoke about. Others might not at all. The idea is we all need to be brought to the same line and start on the same starting point, understanding that it is our responsibility to reach out and make a change. I really call it selfishness. It's selfish accessibility because, again, as I said, guys, at the age of 99, isn't accessibility better for us all? Won't we all prefer accessibility? So let's make sure our society and our workplace and our, you know, emergency evacuation possibility and our fun places, the cinema, the restaurants, everything is accessible and inclusive for all. And don't wait for the legislation. Don't wait for the government. Don't wait for the big funds. It is a training like this. It is taking that human factor that tomorrow morning you will be more accessible, more sensitive, more aware to create a true difference in the life of people with disabilities. It starts with that. Budget will come. Processes, procedures, legislation will come. But let's start making a difference tomorrow morning. And we're here to assist in any way we can. Thank you very, very much.
Michal, thank you very much. I do want just to say that I already put my contact details
Thank you very,
here,
very
so,
much.
Thank you.
The best wishes to you.
Thank you.
І величезне прохання до пані Катерини. Так, до пані Катерини, щоб запис цієї зустрічі ви на наші електронні адреси все ж таки надіслали, тому що, на жаль, не всі наші колеги змогли сьогодні долучитися.
Okay. I do have your information on registration, so I can send it. I can send the link, and you do have my contact details here. For those who who may be interested in accessibility of academic institution, tomorrow we have in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, online meeting on this topic, and I send it here to the chat, the link to registration. Yes, we can share the presentation too. Just please write me down if you need the presentation, because otherwise I'll need to send it to everyone. Again, you can write me Ukrainian, Russian, English, and you'll join the our group of
Будемо вам дуже
members,
вдячні.
let's say.
Надсилайте.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys, and stay safe.
Be safe. Have a nice day.
Дякую.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Welcome. Bye-bye.